Hello everyone, welcome to the Realm of Comics, where we talk everything comics, manga, graphic novels. Believe it or not, I've already filmed this video once. And I'm very upset because I accidentally deleted this video and I had already filmed it. I was ahead of schedule and had already filmed it. Whatever at this point. All right, so today we're here to talk about my favorite graphic novels and manga of 2023. Now, I didn't include comics in this because honestly, I didn't read a lot of comics in 2023, and that had a lot to do with me kind of stopping buying single issues because it just became way too expensive. And then on top of that, I had started reading a lot more middle grade graphic novels, and YA graphic novels started to become a bigger thing for me this past year, and so I primarily focus on those. So I have 6 manga titles, some of them series, and 6 graphic novels that I really ended up enjoying this year. So we're gonna go ahead and jump in and get started. As always, if you like this video, make sure you go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you always want to see content from this channel, click the subscribe button, make sure you hit the bell for notifications, and let's just dive in and start with the manga. All right, so the first one should come as no surprise to anyone. I think that this definitely was a hit all around the reading community, whether it's the manga community, MangaTube, BookTube, Bookstagram, BookTok. Everybody wanted to get their claws into One Piece this year, and I'm not mad at it. I ended up reading the first 6 volumes of One Piece last year. I definitely want to read more this year, but I don't think I'm going to be able to catch up this year. I have a lot of reading that I anticipate getting done in 2024, and so I do want to read some, but One Piece is just epic, y'all. It is like, it's intimidating when you think about the length of the series and like just the amount of content, but it is super accessible. It is fun. I see why people love it so much. I watch a little bit of the live action adaptation on Netflix and really enjoyed that. But One Piece now holds a little special place in my like top series of manga that I've really enjoyed, and literally have enjoyed every single volume. Have not found a dud yet. I think that once I finish like the first story arc, I will go back and do like some review of the story arcs and kind of share my thoughts and opinions instead of kind of like reviewing it volume by volume, because of course it's just too many volumes to do that. The next one that is on my list is Oshinoko, and this is a new series that we got this year in the US, and we are currently I think up to like volume 5. I am still waiting for volume 4. I'm on hold for it at my library. This is a very interesting one, and I think it has like a very weird / like strange start to it, in the sense that we are following this idol who has a lot of fame, popularity, and she ends up pregnant. And so she goes and she sees this doctor that's helping her through her pregnancy. She's pregnant with twins, and of course things happen. I don't want to really say what happens because it kind of spoils part of it, but I can say that her twins end up as reincarnations of 2 people. Very weird premise. Some of the first volume was kind of like a little like strange because of the context of who the twins were, but I'm telling you, stick with the series. Once you get past volume 1, it is epic in the way that it addresses like being a teen idol, the like industry as a whole, like the toll it takes on teens and adults. And it's a revenge story. It's so many different moving parts to this. It definitely takes a darker spin than what I anticipated, because when I was reading the first volume, I was like, this is kind of weird. And then we got to the end of the first volume and I was like, oh, this is super sad and dark. So definitely check this one out. One of my favorites of 2023. Something's Wrong with Us. This is volume 14, but I think I'm up to volume 13 in the series, and I need to catch up because we're coming to the end, if we're not already at the end of Something's Wrong with Us. So Izzy from Happy for Now and Shay from Shay Geeks Out put me onto this series at the end of 2022, and in 2023 I flew through a good chunk of this series. This is the most sick and twisted series that I think I have read in a long time. I mean, it's good. It follows these 2 main characters who used to know each other as kids. Her mother used to work in his father's like sweet shop, and things go wrong and his father ends up dead, and her mother is the one that's accused of killing him. And so she tries to move on with her life, but every corner that she turns, people get notice of like her mother's past. And so she eventually ends up coming back to the same shop, and he does not realize that it is her, like from childhood. And it takes some twists and turns. I literally feel like every single one of these volumes, Undo just kind of makes your jaw hit the floor. It is the most absurd and chaotic and interesting series that I have ever read. Literally every volume I'm like, what in the world? Like, what are we doing here? Like, what is going on? And so I'm hoping to finish this series up though in 2024. Another one that Shay and Izzy put me on to I think they put me onto this in 2022, but I don't think I got to it until 2023, and that's the Apothecary Diaries. So good. This is so good. This is like a historical manga that has some very complex pieces and parts to it, with some feminist undertones, mystery. I would say almost like a historical mystery in some ways. But we are following our main character, Mao Mao, who is she works in the inner it's like the inner circle of the emperor, and he has several different wives, and so she ends up working under one specifically, but she has skills in regard to like working in an apothecary, and so she uses her skill set to help solve some mysteries of what's been happening at the palace. And it's a lot of like political intrigue. It's very interesting, and a series that I definitely plan on continuing this year. I highly recommend this one. I have volumes 4 and 5 upstairs, I believe, and I need to go ahead and pick those up so I can move on to the next set. The next series that I have is one that I randomly ended up reading last year and absolutely fell in love with it, and that is The Yakuza's Bias. I read both volumes 1 and volume 2 last year. I don't know if we are going to get any more in the series. I haven't double checked. And when I was looking after I finished volume 2, I couldn't find anything, which is super unfortunate because it's so hilarious. It literally is about this man who is he's part of the Yakuza, and he ends up connecting with like the boss's daughter, and she puts him on to K-pop, and he becomes obsessed, like obsessed. Like, you know, he has a bias and everything, and he goes hard for this group, and it's hilarious because it's kind of like he has this personality as being part of the Yakuza, and then he has this like stan personality when it comes to the K-pop group, and it's just a sweet ode to the K-pop world, which I'm not involved, but I could appreciate what this manga was attempting to do. I also think the artwork in this one was superb. The illustrations just got everything down to a T. That's what made it so hilarious, was the illustrations, especially when it came to like the facial expressions and stuff like that. Absolutely adore Yakuza's Bias. I definitely will check to see if there are more coming out whenever I get an opportunity to take a quick look. And the last one on this list is not really like a series, it's an author, and that's Ray Toma. Ray Toma is a mangaka that I discovered last year, and it started when I read The King's Beast, and I realized that The King's Beast is not necessarily like a spin-off, but it takes place in the same world as Dawn of the Arcana. And so I read King's Beast, or The King's Beast, and I gave that one 5 stars, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go back and read Dawn of the Arcana to get like a better idea of what this world is, because Dawn of the Arcana came first, and I read the entire series. I think that Ray Toma was my most read author of 2023 because I've literally flew through Dawn of the Arcana. I read the entire series and fell in love. Every volume that I read was either 4 or 5 stars, easily, hands down. It was absolutely amazing. It is like historical fantasy with like a touch of romance. There's a lot of political intrigue. There's an interesting world that we have with these animal-like beings that are considered like to be a lower tier of being than humans. We have a main character that is kind of like standing out because she has red hair, and it's just really good. I really enjoyed that, and The King's Beast. I think they're both epic dynamic series. I think this year I'm going to focus on finishing up The King's Beast because I loved Honor the Arcana so much, and I gave volume 1 of The King's Beast 5 stars. So these are definitely like manga like styles and genres that are really up like my alley. Alright, so switching over to graphic novels, I have another 6 here, and I think all of these are middle grade graphic novels except one, which shows you that middle grade graphic novels had just a chokehold on me last year. And a lot of these are actually 2023 releases. So last year was a very good release year for middle grade graphic novels, and I'm hoping that 2024 proves to be the same. So the first one that we're going to talk about is School Trip. This is the 3rd book in the New Kid series. I think that we are done with this series. I think Jerry Craft, I think it's just going to be a trilogy to my understanding. I could be wrong, but I think that it's just going to be a trilogy. And School Trip is a 3rd in this one, where we see our characters going to Paris, and we see the usual gang and the usual suspects up to no good. I don't want to really say too much because it is the 3rd in the series, and it's not companion in the way that you could just start wherever. Like, you need to start with volume 1 because it gives you an idea of all the characters, the relationships, and the issues that they end up having along the trip. I think that this was his strongest one in terms of like social commentary. He was very heavy-handed, which I didn't mind. He was very heavy-handed at addressing some social commentary of what has been happening in the country, a lot of it about book banning and book challenging. There were some cameos of some other great authors and illustrators that I appreciated him including. He always does that. He gives nods to those who are already in the industry, and I think it's just amazing. And nods to people in the industry that like middle grade readers would be familiar with, like Renee Watson, Jason Reynolds. Like he's great at doing that. But I absolutely love this one. I can't wait to see what Jerry Craft is coming out with in the future. As a matter of fact, I may do some searching and see if he has anything slated to release in 2024, or if we may not see anything from him again until 2025. The next one that I have is Parachute Kids. This was one that I gravitated towards because I had read Parachutes by Kelly Yang, which is a young adult contemporary fiction book, and it was my first like awareness and understanding of what like a parachute kid was. And so when I saw that this graphic novel was coming out, I was like, oh, I would love to read this, and this is for a middle grade audience. So in this book, we're following 3 kids with their parents who are supposed to be coming to the US to live, and we shortly thereafter find out that the parents are actually leaving the 3 kids in the US and they're going back home. And the reason why they have to do that is for visa purposes, and it's just easier for the kids to stay there and to give them an opportunity at better education, etc., better opportunities, than to take them back home. And so we see these 3 kids have to navigate what it's like living in the US by themselves, where there's a language barrier, there's a culture barrier, and eventually having to figure out how to assimilate to being here in the US. And each kid handles their experience very differently. I thought that the illustrations in this were superb. I thought the different conversations, and not just about being an immigrant, but just being a teen or being like a middle school age kid, it's tough. It is tough. And to have those added pressures of not having any like parental supervision in the household, and you know, trying to learn how to speak English, like it just makes things more intense. But I absolutely adored this one and highly recommend checking it out. The next 2 are probably, oh man, this is kind of hard for me to say this. Okay, I'm gonna do one and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna explain something because it's gonna be interesting. So the next one that I have on this list is Family Style. I read this one for my Goodreads graphic novel challenge that I did in December, early part of December, and Family Style was so good. I love graphic memoirs. They are just chef's kiss. It's such an easy way to digest information about somebody. I just like any like nonfiction that's been turning into a graphic novel. Like it makes my soul happy. And they're great for people who don't find nonfiction like typically accessible. But Family Style is following a young boy who ends up leaving Vietnam with his family. And from the beginning, this is such an intense book when they are on a ship trying to leave Vietnam and pirates come and take over the ship. And like his mother closes his eyes or tells him to close his eyes so he doesn't see anything that's happening. And you get these solid pages just that are black and just speech bubbles where she's like, I'm right here with you. I'm right here with you. And just putting yourself into his position, being that young and having to experience something like that can be very, very traumatizing and leaves a lasting impression. But we follow the family as they leave Vietnam, and then they get sponsored to come to the US, and the adjustments that they have to make coming to the US, like down to the food, the language, getting jobs, the kids going to school. And this was really, really interesting because he spends a great portion of his life in America. And so he finds himself caught in between, like not necessarily being American, but losing this like feeling of being Vietnamese. There was a specific scene that I think will stick with me where he's hanging out with his friends, and his mom had packed them like the traditional Vietnamese food, and he's with his friends, and he's like, basically, you know, I'm not eating this in front of my friends. Like, I'm Vietnamese, but at the same time, I'm not. And, you know, it's like, oh, I want to go to, you know, like the Dairy Queen and have a burger and a shake. And so it's his experience of almost becoming like Americanized and distancing himself from his Vietnamese background until he meets other Vietnamese students. And he's like, wow, like I'm very much so like out of touch with my own background and culture. I thought it was great. It wasn't a perfect book for me. There were a couple of things that I think could have been like fleshed out a little bit, or I wish I could have seen more of, especially like because of the time jumps. But in terms of like impact and art style and the storytelling, I've really, really enjoyed them. All right, what I was going to say is that these last three, if I had to pick my top 3 reads of like the year when it comes to graphic novels, comics, and manga, it would be these 3. It would be these 3 would be fighting for first, second, and third place. So the first one that we have is Mexikid. This was hilarious. It is thick, mind you. This is a thick one, and even the way that the book is made is like, it's really thick and heavy. But it is a longer middle grade graphic novel where we follow Pedro and his family as they are living in the United States, and they have to travel back to Mexico to get his grandfather and move him back to the United States. And so it's just literally following the family as they make that journey. But as they make that journey, you learn so much about their experiences. It takes place during, this has to be like the 70s or 80s, and how even the kids, it's a lot of kids. I think that they had, did they have 11 kids? They had a large, somewhere in between, maybe it was only like 7 and 9, but it was a big family. It was a big family. I think it was 7 to 9 kids, 7 to 9 kids. I have a big family, and what's interesting about their family dynamics is like half of the kids were born in Mexico and lived there and were raised in Mexico for a little while, and the other half were born and raised in the United States. And so you see a distinction in how they experience Mexico, and they're all Mexican, but it's their experiences are different. Like even down to like drinking the milk, like the younger kids couldn't drink the raw milk because their bodies were not used to it and weren't conditioned for it, and they would end up getting really, really sick. But the older kids had grown up drinking it, and so their bodies were accustomed to it. So even like small things like that. There was like a funny like haircut scene that just had me screaming. There was a scene when they came back, they were driving back from Mexico, and they came across a deer that it was, I don't even want to spoil it, but it's been a while since like I've read a graphic novel, and I literally was laughing out loud as I read it. This was just such a great form of storytelling. I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. It was wonderful. And it's not just about like the journey. I think it's a lot about him understanding himself, his father, and especially his grandfather, because he doesn't necessarily feel like he has the best relationship with his grandfather. He doesn't really know his grandfather. And so there's all these like tidbits of history about his grandfather that he doesn't know, that he's learning now. And his grandfather was born in the 1800s. And so, you know, he's older when they go get him, and I believe he ends up living till he's over 100 years old. So just great illustrations, great storytelling. Mark my words, this will be an award winner for 2023. So will this next one. This next one was so good, and I was like, why is everybody loving this? Let me just go ahead and check this out. So it's a first time for everything. Oh gosh, this was so good. Literally, the title says everything. Like, there's a first time for everything that we experience in life, and especially as you're going through like your adolescence. And this reminded me so much of like my own adolescence and like traveling overseas for the first time. So we're following this main character who primarily like has been in his hometown for forever. He doesn't really get to go many places, and then he gets this opportunity to travel overseas for the first time with his class during the summer, which is something that I got to do my senior year of high school. I was able to go to France and Spain, and when I tell you at that age, traveling overseas like that is a life-altering experience. It changes your global perspective, and it really does. It just really does. But while he's overseas, like, he learns so much about himself, about love, loss, heartbreak, and it really just felt like a pure coming of age story. I have never seen a coming of age graphic novel done as well as this, where you, even as an adult, because I think middle grade readers reading this would be like, they are in the moment experiencing these things. As an adult reading this, it was a definite like feel of reflection. Like, oh, I remember how that felt. Or I remember when I went through that. And so I think it was designed in a way that is perfect for all ages. Like, it really is. And that's such a difficult thing to do, because a lot of times when I'm reading middle grade or YA, I always keep in mind that I'm not the target audience. And sometimes when I feel like I'm the target audience, I have an issue with that. But this was crafted in a way where it was like middle grade and up, target audience. You can connect with this in some way, some shape, some form. Absolutely adored this one. The artwork was the coloring, the inking, perfection. I know this was already, I think this won the National Book Award, or at least was a National Book Award finalist, but I'm pretty sure it got the National Book Award. I can't wait for this to either win a Caldecott or Newbery or something, because it was perfect. And the last one that I have is Be a Wolf, which I talked about this one heavily in my Goodreads Choice Awards vlog. So I'll make sure that I link that up so you can check out some of the other stuff that I may have talked about in that vlog. So I won't talk about this one too heavily, but this is a kind of reimagining of Beowulf. And one of the best, that's why I said it's so hard, because those three are like neck and neck. But the artwork in Beowulf was stunning. It's black and white, but it is so daggone gorgeous. The detail in the sketches are so good. It is an epic poem style, but super accessible, which blew my mind, because, you know, I've read parts of Beowulf when I was in school. I like the parts that I read when I was in school, but it is an epic poem. Not always the most accessible thing. And so when I was thinking about this, I was a play on it, and then I started reading it, and I was like, this is in the same like format as Beowulf. It reads like an epic poem, but it reads like an epic poem that if you're reading it to, I would say, like 9 and 10 and up, they would get it. It makes perfect sense. It's such an ode to childhood, like keeping that childhood energy about you, and like having fun and enjoying life, and just seeing things for what they are. Like, it is so beautiful. It is a love letter to childhood, and I loved it so freaking much. I loved it so much. It was so good. And I don't know like if this one would be a contender for anything, because I believe that the illustrator for this one is not from the US, and unfortunately that is part of the criteria for receiving the Caldecott. If it wasn't, I promise you this one would be up there. It really, really would. All right, y'all. So those are my favorite graphic novels and manga of 2023. Let me know in the comments down below what were some of your favorites, and also let me know if you have read any of these or if you are interested in reading any of these. And I will be back with another video soon.